Hello, my friend, and welcome to this study. I've got a lot of nice sounds for you today, and a story. Because today we look at the story of Phaethon, the Radiant, the son of the god Helios, whose chariot of the sun Phaethon drove to meet his disastrous end. Phaethon comes to us in many texts. Beginning with Euripides. And we will look at 3 of them, each from a different kind of author. Pliny's Natural History, Ovid's Metamorphoses, and a reference by the bard himself, William Shakespeare. There will be relaxing sounds to accompany us, and as always, softly inspiring stories, as well as some Latin. Euripides' lost tragedy, Phaethon, survives only in 12 fragments, comprising about 400 lines of text. In his play, Phaethon is the son of Helios and an Oceanid, who nonetheless hid the boy's true parentage. And the play focuses on his upcoming marriage, though Phaethon seems unwilling. It is possible that his bride is Aphrodite, but this remains one of the mysteries, unsolvable in these fragments as they exist. When his mother reveals who Phaethon's father really is, Phaethon decides to travel east to find this divine man, his father. Helios accompanies Phaethon on this doomed journey, riding a horse named Sirius, shouting instructions and advice on how to drive the chariot. And these are a few lines that we have from what remains of Euripides' play. First, we shall look at Pliny and his cheeky explanations of the origins of amber petrified tree sap. You might be able to hear some sounds outside as well, because at the moment there are some birds that are doing their bird business, flapping and chattering and walking around on the roof next to the study's window. And these are some amber beads. And I thought we could light this amber candle. And have a nice glow for our Pliny. It's a very lovely, warm smell. And it will give us a little glow there. Very relaxing. And I will write out Pliny in Latin as I read the English for us. Pliny, Natural History, Chapter 11, Amber, the many falsehoods that have been told about it. Next in rank, among the objects of luxury, we have amber, an article which, for the present, however, is in request among women only. All these three last-mentioned substances hold the same rank, no doubt, as precious stones. The two former for certain fair reasons, crystal because it is adapted for holding and taking cool drinks, and murine vessels for taking drinks that are either hot or cold. But as for amber, luxury has not been able as yet to devise any justification for the use of it. This is a subject which affords us an excellent opportunity of exposing some of the frivolities and falsehoods of the Greeks, and I beg that my readers will only have patience with me while I do so, it being really worthwhile for our own practical improvement to become acquainted with the marvelous stories which they have promulgated respecting amber. After Phaethon had been struck by lightning, his sisters, they tell us, became changed into poplars, which every year shed their tears upon the banks of the Eridanus, a river known to us as the Padus. To these tears was given the name of electrum, from the circumstance that the sun was usually called elector. Such is the story, at all events, that is told by many of the poets, the first of whom were, in my opinion, Aeschylus, Philoxenus, Euripides, Satyrus, and Nicander, and the falsity of which is abundantly proved upon the testimony of Italy itself. Those among the Greeks who have devoted more attention to the subject have spoken of certain islands in the Adriatic Sea known as the Electrides, and to which the Padus, they say, carries down electrum. It is the fact, however, that there never were any islands there so called, nor indeed any islands so situated as to allow the Padus carrying down anything in its course to their shores. As to Aeschylus placing the Eridanus in Iberia, or in other words in Spain, and giving it the name of Rhodanus, and as to Euripides and Apollonius representing the Rhodanus and the Padus as discharging themselves by one common mouth on the shores of the Adriatic. we can forgive them all the more readily for knowing nothing about amber when they betray such monstrous ignorance of geography. For Ovid, I've got some tea, some tisane, with a beautiful sunny green colour. So we'll pour this now. Would not be the study if we didn't do a little bit of Latin. So, for Ovid, there we go, and liber secundus from Ovid's Metamorphoses. First we have Regia solis erat sublimibus alta columnis clara micante auro flammasque imitante. Look at these lovely participles we have. Piropo, cuius, ebur nitidum fastigia summa tegebat. Argenti biforis radiabant lumine. While why? So we have Regia solis, or the palace of the sun. Erat was sublimibus alta columnis, alta raised, sublimibus columnis, on columns of stateliness on stately columns. Clara micante auro flammasque imitante piroppo. Like flame. And I think we can say we've got flaming and all of these. So not forgetting our ablatives. So with glowing or glittering gold and flammasque and flames. Flames. Imitante piroppo, that imitated fire. Cuius ebur mitidum. So we have glowing or glittering again. Ivory, whose are possessive. Glittering, ivy, glowing, glittering, shining. Ivory. And summa tege, but summa the top. Stigia the roof. It's glittering ivy roof. Tegebat covered. Summa the top. And we have bifores, double doors, of silver, argenti. Radiabant lumine valvae. Radiabant, radiated, beamed, these two double doors of silver. Lumine valvae, with light of shutters. So the light of the shutters there, the double shuttered silver door, I can imagine. I'll write the rest in Latin as I read the English story, which is quite good, of poor Phaethon, the boy who wanted to ride his father's sun chariot. And the workmanship exceeded all the wealth of gems and gold, for there had Mulciber engraved the seas, encircling the middle of the earth, the round of earth and heaven impending over the land. And there mid the waves were azure deities, melodious Triton, elusive Proteus, there Aegean pressing with his arms the backs, and men and cities, woods and savage beasts and streams and nymphs and sylvan deities were carved upon the land, and over these an image of the glittering sky was fixed. 6 signs were on the right, 6 on the left. Here, when audacious Phaethon arrived, by steep ascending paths, without delay, he entered in the shining palace gates of his reputed parent, making haste to stand in his paternal presence. There, unable to endure the dazzling light, he waited at a distance. Phoebus sat, arrayed in royal purple, on a throne that glittered with the purest emeralds. There, to the left and right, day month and year, time and the hours at equal distance stood, and vernal spring stood crowned with wreathed flowers, and naked summer stood with sheaves of wheat, and autumn stood besmeared with trodden grapes, and icy winter rough with hoary hair. And from the midst, with orbs that view the world, Phoebus beheld the trembling youth, fear-struck in mute amazement, and he said, "Declare the reason of your journey. What would you in this my palace, Phaethon, my child, my beloved boy?" And Phaethon replied, "O universal light of all the world, my father Phoebus, if your name be mine, give to me, my sire, a token to declare your fatherhood, which may establish my assured descent and leave no dark suspicions in our minds." Then Phoebus from his shining brows cast down his circling rays, called Phaethon to him, and as he held him to his breast he replied, "O child most worthy of your sire, the truth was told to you by your mother. Wherefore doubts to dissipate? Consider your desire and ask of me that I may freely give." The lake, which is just beyond our view, is what the oath of the gods inviolate. Be witness to my word. When this was said, the happy youth at once began to plead command and guidance of his father's steeds, wing-footed, and his chariot for a day. But Phoebus much repented that he swore, and thrice and 4 times shook his radiant head. Ah, would I might refuse my plighted word, and oh, that it were lawful to deny the promised boon. For I confess, O son, this only I should keep from thee, and yet 'tis lawful to dissuade. It is unsafe to satisfy your will. It is a great request, O Phaethon, which neither suits your utmost strength nor your tender years. For you are mortal, and you have aspired to things immortal. Ignorance has made your thought transcend the province of the gods. I vaunt no vain exploits, but only I can stand securely on the flame-fraught axle-tree. Even the ruler of Olympian gods, who hurls fierce lightnings with his great hand, may never dare to drive this chariot. And what are you, equal to mighty Jove? The opening path is steep and difficult, for scarcely can the steeds, refreshed at dawn, climb up the steeps, and when it has reached the height, extreme of midmost heaven, and sea and earth are viewed below, my trembling breast is filled with fearful apprehensions, and requires the last precipitous descent a sure command. Then also Tethys, who receives me in her subject waves, is wont to fear lest I should fall disastrous, and around the hastening sky revolves in constant whirl, dawning the lofty stars with rapid twist. I struggle on, the force that overcomes the heavenly bodies overwhelms me not, and I am borne against that rapid globe. Suppose the chariot yours, what could you do? Can you drive straight against the twisted pole and not be carried from the lofty path by the swift car? Are you deceived to think there may be groves and cities of the gods and costly temples wondrously endowed? The journey is beset with dreadful snares and shapes of savage animals. If you should hold upon your way without mistake, yet must your journey be through Taurus's horns, and through the bow Hymenean, and the jaws of the fierce lion, and the cruel arms of scorpion, bent throughout a vast expanse, and Cancer's curving arms reversely bent. It is no easy task for thee to rule the mettled 4-foot steeds, inflamed in fires that kindle in their breasts, forth issuing in breathings from their mouths and nostrils hot. I scarce restrain them as their struggling necks pull on the harness, when their heated fires are thus aroused. And, O my son, lest I may be the author of a baneful gift, beware, and as the time permits, recall thy rash request. It is manifest I am your father. Behold my countenance, and oh, that you could even pierce my bosom with your eyes, and so discover my paternal cares. Look around you on the treasured world's delights, and ask the greatest blessing of the sky or sea or land, and you shall suffer no repulse. But only this I must deplore, which rightly named would be a penalty and not an honor. You have made a request of punishment and not a gift indeed, you witless boy. For doubt it not, I have sworn it by the Stygian waves. Why, you hold my neck with your caressing arms. Whatever you wish, it shall be given. But you should wish more wisely. So were all of Phoebus' admonitions said, availing not. For Phaethon resisted his advice, and urged again his claim, and eagerly burned to use the chariot. Phoebus, long delaying and reluctant, took the youth to view the spacious chariot, gift of Vulcan. Gold was the axle, and the beam was gold. The great wheel had a golden tire and spokes of silver. Chrysolites and diamonds reflected from the spangled yoke the light of Phoebus. While aspiring Phaethon admired the glittering chariot and its workmanship, the vigilant Aurora opened forth her purple portals from the ruddy east, disclosing halls replete with roses. All the stars took flight, while Lucifer, the last to quit his vigil, gathered that great host and disappeared from his celestial watch. And when his father, Phoebus, saw the earth and the wide universe in glowing tints arrayed, as waned the moon's diminished horns far distant, then he bade the nimble hours to yoke the steeds. At once the deities accomplished his commands, and led the steeds, ambrosia-fed and snorting flames, from out their spacious stalls, and fixed their sounding bits. Then, with a hallowed drug, the father touched the stripling's face, to make him proof against the rapid flame, and wrought around his hair the sun rays. But, foreboding grief, he said, while many a sigh heaved from his anxious breast, if you can only heed your father's voice, be sparing of the whip, and use with nerve the reins, for of their own accord the steeds will hasten. Difficult are they to check in full career. You must not drive the car directly through 5 circles, for the track takes a wide curve obliquely, and is bound by the extreme edge of 3 zones. It avoids the southern pole, and it avoids the bear that roams around the north. The way is plain, the traces of the wheel are manifest. Observe with care that both the earth and sky have their appropriate heat. Drive not too low, nor urge the chariot through the highest plain, for if your course attain too great a height, you will consume the mansions of the sky, and if too low, the land will scorch with heat. Take the middle plain, where all is safe, nor let the wheel turn over to the right and bear you to the twisted snake, nor let it take you to the altar on the left, so close to earth, but steer the middle course. To fortune I commit your fate, whose care for you, so reckless of yourself, I pray. While I am speaking, humid night has touched the margin of Hesperian shores. 'Tis not for us to idle, we are called away. When bright aurora shines, the darkness flies. Take up the reins, but if your stubborn breast be capable of change, use not this chariot, but heed my counsel while the time permits, and while your feet are on a solid base, but not, according to your foolish wish, pressing the axle. Rather, let me light the world beneath your safe and wondering gaze. But Phaethon, with youthful vigor, leaped, and in the light-made chariot lightly stood, and he rejoiced, and with the reins in hand thanked his reluctant parent. Instantly Eos, Aethon, Pyrrhus, and Phlegon, the winged horses of the sun, gave vent to flame-like neighs that filled the shaking air. They pawed the barriers with their shining hoofs. Then Tethys, witless of her grandson's fate, let back the barriers, and the universe was theirs to traverse. Taking the well-known road and moving through the air with winged feet, they pierced resisting clouds, and spreading wide their pinions, soared upon the eastern wind, far wafted from that realm. But Phaethon, so easy of their yoke, lost all control, and the great car was tossed, as tapered ships when lightened of their ballast toss and heave unsteady in the surging seas. The car leaped lightly in the air, and in the heights was tossed unsteady as an empty shell. Soon as the steeds perceived it, with a rush impetuous they left the beaten track, regardless of all order and control. And Phaethon, filled with fear, knew not to guide with trusted reins, nor where the way might be, nor, if he knew, could he control their flight. Warmed in the sunshine never felt before, the Gaelid Trionis attempted vain to bathe in seas. The serpent, cold and torpid by the frozen pole, too cold for contest, warmed and rage assumed from heat. Troubled by the heat, took flight, impeded by his wane. And from skies of utmost height, unhappy Phaethon beheld the earth receding from his view. A pallor spread his cheeks with sudden fear, his knees began to quake, and through the flare of vast effulgence, darkness closed his eyes. Now, vainly he regrets he ever touched his father's steeds, and he is stunned with grief that so entreating he prevailed to know his true descent. He rather would be called the son of Merops, as a ship is tossed by raging Boreas, when the conquered helm has been abandoned, and the pilot leaves the vessel to his vows and to the gods, so helpless he is borne along the sky. What can he? Much of heaven remains behind, a longer distance is in front of him, each way is measured in his anxious mind. At first his gaze is fixed upon the west, which fate has destined he shall never reach, and then his eyes turn backward to the east, so, stupefied and dazed, He neither dares to loose the bits, nor tighten the reins, and he is ignorant of the horses' names. He sees horrific wonders scattered round, and images of hideous animals. And there's a spot where Scorpion bends his claws in double circles, and with tail and arms on either side, stretches his limbs throughout the space of 2 celestial signs. And when the lad beheld him, steeped in oozing slime of venom, swart and threatening to strike grim wounds with jagged spear points, he was lost, and fixed in chills of horror dropped the reins. When these they felt upon their rising backs, the startled steeds sprang forthwith, and, unchecked, through atmospheres of regions unexplored, thence goaded by their unchecked violence, broke through the lawful bounds, and rushed upon the high fixed stars. They dragged the chariot through devious ways, and soared amid the heights, dashed down deep pathways, far precipitous, and gained at level near the scorching earth. Phoebe is wondering that her brother's steeds run lower than her own, and sees the smoke of scorching clouds. The highest altitudes are caught in flames, and as their moistures dry, they crack in chasms. The grass is blighted, trees are burnt up with their leaves, the ripe brown crops give fuel for self-destruction. Oh, what small complaints! Great cities perish with their walls, and peopled nations are consumed to dust. The forests and the mountains are destroyed. Cilician Taurus, Athos, Tmolus, and Oeta are burning, and the far-famed Ida and all her cooling rills are dry and burning, and virgin Helicon and Hoimus, later Oegerus called, and Etna with tremendous redoubled flames, and double-peaked Parnassus, Sicilian Eryx, Cynthus, Orthris, pine-clad, and Rhodope, deprived his snowy mantle. And Ossa burns with Pindus, and greater than those 2 Olympus burns, the lofty Alps, the cloud-topped Apennines, and Phaethon, as he inhaled the air, burning and scorching as a furnace blast, and saw destruction of the flaming world, and his great chariot wreathed in quenchless fires, was suddenly unable to endure the heat, the smoke and cinders, and he swooned away. If he had known the way, those winged steeds would rush as wild unguided. Then the skin of Ethiopians took a swarthy hue, the hot blood tingling to the surface. Then the heat dried up the land of Libya, dishevelled. The lorn nymphs lamenting sought for all their emptied springs and lakes in vain. The Nile, affrighted, fled to parts remote, and hid his head forever from the world. Now empty are his 7 mouths, and dry without or wave or stream, and also dry is Menian Hebrus, Strymon, and the streams of Hesperland, the rivers Rhine and Rhone and Po and Tiber, ruler of the world. And even as the ground asunder burst, the light amazed in gloomy Tartarus the king infernal and his spouse. The sea contracted, and his level waste became a sandy desert. The huge mountain tops, once covered by the ocean's waves, reared up, by which the scattered Cyclades increased. Even the fishes sought for deeper pools. The crooked dolphins dared not skip the waves. The lifeless sea calves floated on the top. And it is even famed that Nereus hid with Doris and her daughters deep below in seething caverns. Then the genial earth, although surrounded by the waters of the sea, was parched and dry, for all her streams had hid deep in the darkness of her winding caves. She lifted her productive countenance up to her rounded neck, and held her palms on her sad brows, and as the mountains, huge, trembled and tottered beneath her wonted plain, declined she for a space, and thus began, with parched voice: "If this is your decree, O highest of the gods, if I have sinned, why do your lightnings linger? For if doomed by fires consuming I to perish must, let me now die in your celestial flames, hurled by your arm, and thus alleviate by your omnipotence this agony. If not your brother's good nor mine may touch your mercy, let the pity of your heaven follow the smoking poles on either side attest. If flames consume them or destroy the ruin of your palace, Atlas, huge with restive shoulders, hardly can support the burning heavens. If the seas and lands together perish, and your palace fall, the universe confused will plunge once more to ancient chaos. Save it from this wreck, if anything survive the fury of the flames." So made the tortured earth an end of speech, and she was fain to hide her countenance in caves that border on the nether night. But now the almighty Jupiter, having called to witness all the gods of heaven, and him who gave the car, that else his power be shown must perish all in dire confusion, high he mounted to the altitude from which he spreads the mantling clouds, and fulminates his dreadful thunders and swift lightning bolts terrific. Clouds were none to find on earth, and the surrounding skies were void of rain. Jupiter, Jove, having reached that summit, stood and poised in his almighty hand a flashing dart, and, hurling it, deprived of life and seat the youthful charioteer, and struck with fire the raging flames. And by the same great force those flames, enveloping the earth, were quenched, and he who caused their fury lost his life. Frantic in their fright, the horses sprang across the bounded way, and cast their yokes, and through the tangled harness they leaped. And here the scattered harness lay, and there the shattered axle, wrenched from off the pole, and various portions of the broken car, spokes of the broken wheel were scattered round, and far fell Phaethon with flaming hair, as haply from the summer sky appears a falling star, although it never drops to startled earth. Far distant from his home, the deep Ariadnus received the lad and bathed his foaming face. His body charred by triple flames Hesperian naiads bore, still smoking, to a tomb, and this engraved upon the stone: "Here Phaethon's remains lie buried, he who drove his father's car and fell, although he made a great attempt." Filled with consuming woe, his father hid his countenance with grief. And now, surpassing our belief, they say a day passed over with no glowing sun, but light affording flames appeared to change disaster to the cause of good. Amazed, the woeful Clymene, when she had moaned in grief, amid her lamentations, as across the world she roamed at first to seek his lifeless corpse and then his bones, she wandered to that distant land, and found at last Phaethon's bones ensepulchred. There, clinging to the grave, she fell, and bathed with many tears his name on marble carved, and with her bosom warmed the freezing stone. And all the daughters of the sun went there, giving their tears, alas, a useless gift. They wept and beat their breasts, and day and night called Phaethon, who heard not any sound of their complaint. And there they lay, all scattered round the tomb. They grew into poplar trees, and their tears flow forth from the new-formed boughs. Amber distills and slowly hardens in the sun, and far from there upon the waves is born to deck the Latin women. Here we have Shakespeare and his play, Richard II. Always one of my favourite histories of his, quite different from some of the other histories. Richard II, at only 10 years of age, became King of England. He reigned from June 1337 until his untimely demise in 1399. Born in 1367 in Bordeaux, Richard was the son of Edward the Black Prince. His father had led successful military campaigns during the 100 Years' War, but died in 1376, leaving his father, King Edward III, without his heir. English Parliament was quick to make arrangements, fearing that Richard's uncle, John of Gaunt, who features very prominently in Shakespeare, would ascend to the throne in place of the Black Prince. In order to prevent this, Richard was given the princedom of Wales and inherited several of his father's titles, ensuring that Richard would become the next King of England. He was crowned king at Westminster Abbey on the 16th of July, 1377. In order to deal with continued threat posed to the young king by John of Gaunt, Richard found himself surrounded by counsellors, excluding Gaunt. Struggles with the king's counsellors and peasant revolts, as well as general anarchy, plagued Richard's reign, despite his attempts to secure stability for the country, some more successful than others. John of Gaunt's son, Henry Bolingbroke, was sent into exile, and his estates seized. The House of Lancaster representing an ever-growing threat to Richard's kingship. In 1399, Henry Bolingbroke seized his opportunity, invading and overthrowing Richard in a matter of months. In October 1399, Bolingbroke became King Henry IV of England, and in January 1400, Richard II died in captivity at Pontefract Castle. I shall read a few lines from Richard II that I find quite nice, and also mention Phaethon and his ill-fated ride, born through daring. Northumberland comes back from Bolingbroke, and Richard says, "What must the king do now? Must he submit? The king shall do it. Must he be deposed? The king shall be contented. Must he lose the name of king? Of God's name, let it go. I'll give my jewels for a set of beads, my gorgeous palace for a hermitage, my gay apparel for an almsman's gown, my figured goblets for a dish of wood, my sceptre for a palmer's walking staff, my subjects for a pair of carved saints, and my large kingdom for a little grave, a little grave, an obscure grave. Or I'll be buried in the king's highway, some way of common trade, where subjects' feet may hourly trample on their sovereign's head. For on my art they tread now whilst I live, and buried once, why not upon my head? I talk but idly, and you laugh at me. Most mighty prince, my lord Northumberland, what says King Bolingbroke? Will his majesty give Richard leave to live till Richard die? You make a leg, and Bolingbroke, says I. Answers Northumberland, My lord, in the base court he doth attend to speak with you. May it please you to come down? And Richard replies, Down, down I come, like glistening Phaethon, wanting the manage of unruly jades in the base court, where kings grow base, to come at traitors' calls, and do them grace. In the base court, come down, down court, down king, for night owls shriek where mountain larks should sing. And from above, Henry Bolingbroke says, What says his majesty? And Northumberland replies, Sorrow and grief of heart makes him speak fondly, like a frantic man, yet he is come. Now, my friend, it's time to thank our patrons of the month. But first, thank you to everyone watching. Thank you to those who've donated on Ko-fi, who've written such kind comments, and everyone who's enjoyed the videos of the study. And a particular thank you to our special Patreon supporters. Ben, Bernie, David M, Joshua, Pirate Carrie, Romulus, Therem, and Carman 1000. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Be good to yourself, be kind to others, and as always,